Oké. Even naar. Okay, let's see. Announcement on Facebook. Good, seems that I'm live. Just well, it's not responding too well. Here we go again. Yes. I'll check YouTube. Check YouTube Evabuys directly. Link gives an error. Well, let's see what's happening. Here we go. There's already one present. Welcome. Now we're going to have some general information about working towards the final assignment. You can already see that I'm showing the page you have in the Blackboard course. But maybe we can wait until maybe some more people are present. Connection seems to be okay. Maybe we can test some music if it's working. This is one of the examples I'm going to use about the music to analyze. Well, let's just start. To begin with, what I wanted to do today is give you some information about what kind of test you can expect. It's going to be a general assignment in which I'm going to ask you several questions about music examples. So you get a playlist for recording and also an assignment with specific questions about the music. Now, what are we going to do in general? Well, I'm going back to the first lesson. What we're going to use is the working model for musical analysis. So we're going to apply general principles of how music works. So we talked about unity and segmentation, that you can use repetition, variation, and contrast applied to sound material. And then we talk in terms of pitch, rhythm, dynamics, articulation, color, etc. This results in typical forms. So we talked about the form characters, about Hermann Erpf, his music. This one, for instance, where are we? Form characters, just a moment. Form characters, here we go. So what we did, we discussed all kinds of compositions through music history, from Renaissance music or medieval music until 20th century. Now, and we talked about general characteristics of form. And we talked about 3 ways of making form in music, in classical music, but whatever music, that's the same. Sequential forms with a sequence of clearly separated sections. That can be just a ballad maybe with a verse and a chorus and a sequencing of that kind of elements. We talked about balanced forms. Those are forms which in time are literally balanced in the sense that you have an A part, then you have a contrasting part, and then you get the A part again. So kind of an A, B, A. So the repetition is on a distance. And well, an example of that is, of course, the late classical sonata form with an exposition, a development section, and a recapitulation. So then those three are the A, B, A, composed out, as it were. And something, so for instance, a combination between the sequential form and the balanced form could be a fourth movement of a symphony, which can have the form of a Viennese rondo. Then you have a ABAC, ABA. So you have two ABA forms, a contrasting section in the middle, C, and then again the ABA at the end. So in general, you could say it's a layered three-part form. And the third one was developing forms. We talked about slowly gradual change in music. So, for instance, by principles of variation in symphonic music, for instance, or 19th century symphonic music. So these are the general form types. But also we had, and I'm just moving back now, if we take compositions from the history of music, then you could say, for instance, a fugue is an example of a contrapuntal polyphonic piece of music. So in the beginning we also talked about texture of music, and you can have homophonic music, which is just a melodic line with a chordal accompaniment, but you can also have imitating contrapuntal music in which each part has a melodic function, is melodically interesting, and you get more sophisticated and more complex musical textures. So I'm just going to take an example. So you have to use, when you are working on the final assignment, it is very sensible to use the working models which you have here. So analysis of form, structure, texture, the general analysis, what kind of questions do we ask ourselves when we are listening to music. This is this working model. First you try to get an overview. Are there certain episodes in the music, points of segmentation, so which part is clearly delineated from another, in what kind of way is it done, etc., etc. And you see here, of course, the repetition, contrast, variation, returning in the questions, and here also texture, relation between parts and voices, polyphonic, homophonic, heterophonic. So here, with this kind of questions, you can just get information about the piece being analyzed. Now, what does this mean for our assignment? Let me just give you an example. This one, a well-tempered keyboard is an analysis of a fugue. Now, this is the example of the score. Now I'll play just the fugue with Barenboim. Here we go. Second voice enters. Sequence. Theme entry, number 3. Sequence, and it's an episode. melody in upper voice, and we are in another key, E flat. Again, sequence technique. Middle voice, theme entry. Sequence again. Again in the top voice, back in the main key. Again the sequence. In the bass. Deceptive cadence, and the end. Now I'm moving now to some added information about this fugue. What I have here is the example. It's in the Blackboard course, of course. You can see that what it is. This is an article from Oxford Music Online, which is the Grove Encyclopedia. The nice thing about it is that you have a very clear example of what this fugue, how it is constructed. So we have an exposition. That means that we get a theme that is presented in every voice which is present in the fugue. So we have a subject, a theme, you could say, introduced, tonal answer. You can see that ti-da-di, bum, bum, fourth, second upward, and here it's a fifth downward, third upward. So the first part of the theme is a little bit adapted for harmonical reasons. We have also an answering interval. We start on C, we start on G, and you can see here when the next entry comes, you can see that it's also on C. Now, and then we have a so-called episode. An episode, so that's a part of the fugue in which there is no complete theme entry present. So we have entry number 1, entry number 2, and then the first voice, the first part which you started, becomes an accompanying voice, accompanying counterpoint. Now you see here the term counter subject. That means that this line is going to be used over and over again above a theme entry or below a theme entry. It's constructed in such a way that the harmony which results from that combination is always fitting. So you can see here melody of the theme in the top voice, counter subject in the lower voice in bar 3. Now then the second grand staff, if you see the subject at the end of the second grand staff, we have the theme entry, and above that the counter subject. Now also we have an interlude or an episode. In our lessons I did not make the distinction between interlude and episode. You could say that an interlude is a kind of an episode within a group of theme entries. Now then we have a long episode with sequence-like material, and then we can see that we have modulated in bar 11. We have the theme entry in E flat major. So it has become major instead of minor. So that is what we see very regularly, that also there is a kind of a tonal structure beneath the total of the piece. So we move from a C minor tonality to the relative major E flat And you can see in bar 11 E flat, and you get an episode, and then we get the second theme entry of this group, and then we are in bar 15, and you can see that again the interval, sorry, that also the answering interval is again a fifth. So the counterpoint in this kind of fugue, it's just this, the thing is I have one theme, and let me show you what I can do with just one theme and how I can make the most beautiful contrapuntal combinations with it. Well, we have even more people hanging out with us. That's great. Well, moving on in this little example, then I'm going to move to the second page just to give you some additional information. This is all on the Blackboard side, as you heard. Now you see that we have again an episode, so an episode without a complete theme entry, and in the longer episodes the sequence formula is the way to make connections between form sections. Now, if you take a look at bar 20, you can see that the subject enters again in the top voice, and we are back in the first tonality, C major. Again, we have an episode with sequence material, so that's nothing new. We get again the subject in bar 26 in the bass line. The C minor key is connected to that entry, and the last one we have in the so-called coda, and you can see that we have a pedal point in the bass, and it's combined with a last statement of the theme, and it ends with the Picardian third. So in the overall, you could say that it's a kind of an arc form. We start in C minor, well, a combination of C and G, answering interval fifth. Then we end up in a parallel key, and at the end we end up in the home key again. So let's just play it again. Oh, that's another one. I need a PDF. Just a moment. Where is my PDF icon? Here it is. G minor. Yes. Okay. Let's move back. Let's just a moment. So I'm going back to the original score without annotations. So I'm going to play it one time more. Sometimes I'm just stopping a little bit and give you some additional information. Here we go. This one. And you can hear that at this moment it's a kind of a temporary ending in G minor. So you can hear that the first theme entry circles around the key of C minor, and then the second entry circles a little bit around G minor. Then we get a sequence which looks a little bit like the theme ti da ti pom pom That's the rhythmical part which comes from the theme, but we never get a complete theme, but we get a ascending sequence. And at this moment we have in the third voice the next theme entry again in C minor. And here you can hear also that it's a kind of a temporary. Let's see. Temporary ending in C minor, a weak version of the tonic, and then again a sequential episode. And you can hear that it's following sorry for my clumsy playing, but you get the point. You get this a kind of a dominant sequence. Let's see, where are we? In bar 9, C major, and then bar 10, F, the second half of the bar B flat, and then bar 11 E flat, and then the second half of the bar A flat. And then when we have arrived at A flat, then we get the first major version of the theme in E flat major. Here we go. Major version. Sequence. And you can also hear that dankjewel, Esad. Ik zit ergens middenin. So again a sequence, and you can hear that it's aiming towards stable chords. Here at the second half of bar 13, E flat, and then the first half of bar 14, B flat. Then the second half of the bar F minor, and then the first part of bar 15, C minor. So that's also a kind of a harmonic sequence. Theme entry, middle voice. And here you can hear a very clear cadence. So that's a very clear cadence in G minor. Then we get again the sequential episode. C minor in the top voice. Again the sequence. And the dominant. Ti, tom, pom, ti. Bass. Deceptive cadence. Now, what is going to be our strategy? I'm going to put this a little bit away. Going back to the site. Now, what kind of question could you expect? You get an example of a fugue, and what I could ask you is, one, mark with a circle the entry of each theme you encounter in this fugue. So you encircle the first note of the theme, and then you, with kind of a line, you give the end. Another one could be, most of the times there are other episodes in this fugue where we have no theme entry, but other material, episodes, mark them. How many of them are there could be a question. What are the keys we encounter during this fugue? And is there a relation between them? So in this case of the C minor fugue, it's obvious, of course, we have C minor and the relative major, E flat major. And we have the relation between the fifth apart of the theme entries. So sometimes we have temporary cadential formulas in C, sometimes in G, sometimes in other keys during the fugue. So that is a possible question. A possible question could be, is there a counter subject? If you remember the article from Oxford Music Online, you can see that here it is marked a counter subject, and it appears very often in combination with a theme entry. Is there such a thing, or is there not? That can be a question also. So that about the first example. Another one can be, let's see, analysis of the form and structure of a piece. And I'm going to use now an example of Mozart. Let's see, where do I have that one? Oh, I think in my... Yes. Okay, I have to switch to the PDF, and I have to hide the blackboard. So this is a part from a piano concerto. Now we're just going to listen once, and I'm scrolling by with the score so you can follow it. Let's see, I had it in Spotify, played recently, then I get a list if everything goes all right. The thing is, everything slows down incredibly when you are live streaming. That's one of the disadvantages. And man, I have 8 GB working memory, and still it's not enough. Here we go, Mozart, Piano Concerto, Köchelverzeichnis 488. That's the one we are going to use. Let's see, A major. Here we go. etc. Now, I'm just pausing here. Now you can definitely hear that it's very clearly a kind of a sequencing form. So the question could be, what kind of form character are we dealing with here? Now, and the right answer would be primarily it would be a sequential form, because we have in the beginning we have the entry of the piano solo, and then we have the tutti taking over. And at a certain moment the solo returns again. Now we start, of course, in 3 sharps A major, but you heard already just a moment ago that we had modulated to a minor key. And the pedal point this is circling around E major. And then Pita. We have moved to the parallel minor of E major. So we develop from A to the 5th and then to the parallel minor key of the dominant. Now, what also could be a question about the music is the way of phrasing, the grouping of measures. Now, in the beginning it's very classical. We have 4 bars, and we have 4 bars. 4 plus 4 makes 8, and that's the kind of balanced melodic structure we encounter very often in classical and early romantic music. Now let's start from the beginning again, and I will stop the music at certain points. Here we go. Cadence. Cadence again. Now, and here again, very clear cadence. Then the new episode is this would be a very clear point of segmentation in terms of the general analysis terminology we used. So this would be a new segment. So in comparison to A, this would be a B. Now we move on. Again, the grouping of measures. Again, above a pedal point A, and now we are on E, sorry. B. Subdominant, dominant, tonic, to minor. And then we have the minor version of something we had already earlier, of course. Surprise. Working towards the next cadence. E major. Now in this pattern here, this is just with another bass line, but it's a very typical pattern which is used very often in 18th century, Romanesca, and maybe you know it from the famous Pachelbel canon. This one. This one, it's a very common pattern, and you can make, when you use that pattern, you get nice walking basses, downward walking basses. Okay, moving on. Circling around E. Cadence. And we're back to A again. Now you can, okay, of course, you have already heard that at the beginning of the return of the really beginning, we are dealing with some kind of a rondo form. Now, and of course, the question would be, well, in terms of keys, what kind of keys do we encounter during the piece? Now, here we have a very clear example of moving to F sharp minor. Is there a logic if we talk about F sharp minor? Of course, because it's the relative minor of A major. So we talked in lessons also about the keys in classical romantic music. They're always in one way or another related. So that's where we are now again. Come on. And of course, continually the exchange between orchestra, soloist, new melodic line, eh? Sorry. Yes. Again to the tutti, minor. Now the major version of that one, minor. chromaticism. Walking bass again. Back to the main key. A major. Sequence. Again, circling around E. And the beginning. All above a pedal, A. Now this is a very straightforward sequencing form with repetition at a distance, so it's a kind of a mix, between sequential form and balancing form. One of the questions could be locate all cadential formulas in which you have and a subdominant and a dominant and a tonic. Or another question could be how many pedal points are there in the piece and what kind of function do they have, tonic or dominant pedal points? So that kind of questions you could expect. Now the thing is, what I would ask you to do is annotate it in the score, answer questions, scan the annotated scores and send it in with your answers, of course. So that one. Now we have had some Baroque music, we have had some classical music. Well, it's obvious that we cannot do without beautiful impressionist music. So my last example would be something from Debussy, which is also on the side. Give me a moment. Yeah, that's the one. I think, yes. That's really rather messy. I made annotations in this one without a decent program, just handwriting with a mouse, so it's not too tidy, to say the least. Let me try to locate a recording, just a moment. Moving back to the beginning. It's one of the preludes from Debussy. les sons et les parfums tournent dans l'air. Now, and here you can see that I put a kind of a V, two mirrored V's. So this is an important segmentation point. The first section of this composition, it circles a little bit. Here we have three sharps. It circles around the tonality of A. Seems to be A major, but we have all kind of other alterated tones present, of course, B flat here. So one of the things we learned about Debussy, that it's not functional tonality, but it's a tonality which circles around tone centers. And the bass is, of course, an important key, an important cue to determine what kind of tonality it is. The important bass notes, I have encircled them, and they all point into the direction of A as a tonal center in the first segment. Now we have also typical use of chords. So this measure, let me see, you cannot see it completely, I believe. How can I solve this? Just a moment. Score is not totally present. Maybe I have to diminish it a little bit. Yeah, this is better, I think. And you can see my moist pointer, which is good. This is a kind of a nice way of typical Debussy technique, because what do we see? If you take the chords, he uses parallel chords. So what chord does he use? All dominant seventh chords in the parallel fashion is one of the trademarks of Debussy. So that could be a question about the first section. Now we move on to the second section of the piece. So here we have a return of the beginning, back to A, same motive as in the beginning. So if I were to ask analytical questions, in what way does repetition and variation occur in this composition? So until now, this is the, you could say, the second segment, third segments, and we have, in general, we have a kind of impression of A, B, A, back to the beginning. And then, of course, we move on, and you can already see at the end of this page, bass moving around A, and then double bar line, change of key signature. So there we get the transition to a new form section. Here we go on. And here you can hear that it's a kind of a variation on the beginning material. I'm circled out the E flat and the A flat in this part. If we move back a little bit, if you focus on the bass line and the harmony, you can hear that it's a kind of a cadence working towards A flat. We are at En Animant. Dominant 7th. A flat. Now this is also very special. I have marked here at the rubato the G sharp. Of course, why? Because it's the enharmonic equal of A flat, where we were. Now this is also a very colorful episode. What kind of principle is there behind these chords in 8 notes? Let me go back a little bit. We are at rubato. Now we come. Now you can see here G chord, G major, B flat minor, G major, E major, C major. So always a third apart. This is typical mediant related chords. So chords a third apart in which you play with major minor sounds, and that's the way it gets a special color effect. Next episode. And C sharp is an important and A returns as an important note in the bass. The use of the lowest note of the piano always gives a very special touch at it. If you take a look at this little annotation, comme une lointaine sonnerie de cœur, it's what he means is a horn signal. It's a kind of an alternative one, because if you would have a real horn call, you would get this. So that's the one we hear in 19th century music, and it's based on natural horn, and this is in a kind of an adapted new age like a horn call, you could say. Well, let's take this one away. Back to the side. Well, I think this is about the things I wanted to show to you. Maybe, why is this not visible? Yes, there we are. Now it's visible. So now one of the other things can be, we did something about pitch systems, late romantic chromaticism, Wagner, Bruckner, Mahler, and things like Debussy with his different modes and colors, Ravel, Bartok we did, and Messiaen with his mode system. Well, I will certainly use fragments from these composers and ask specified questions. So you don't have to be alarmed at, that it will be very difficult. I will always put my questions in such a way, that you are guided in the observation. So with the example of the Debussy, I just played. Always I will ask a question in the first segment, which bass notes are the most important, at what kind of tonality do they point, or if you see the sequence of chords in bar 5 and 6, what can you say about voice leading and what kind of chords are used, why do they work in a special way. So what I will do with the assignment is start with a fragment. You get an instruction for observation, what's happening, what do you hear, what can you see in the score, and then from that come to a conclusion or the answer. So that's what I'm going to do. My intention is to have the assignment ready in the second week of June. And what I would like to do next week is just give another lesson like this one, just musical fragments, observation, so that you are a little bit prepared for your for the making of the assignment. So, if I think I am ready for today. Very nice that you joined. It's a little bit frontal and just talking by me, which is, well, it can't be helped. This is the way I can do things. So if you have questions about something or another, I got several mails of people. If you are not certain about things or have questions, feel free to mail me, and then I can hopefully take away your sorrows or your problems or insecurities, whatever. Nice hanging out with you. Goodbye.